Well, welcome to the Colonsay Rap. This is just a little audio track which is going to run under some photographs that Lesley and I took when we were on Colonsay at the Colonsay Spring Festival.
This was their first ever Spring Festival. In fact, I think it could be Scotland's first ever Spring Festival. And when you think about it, that's amazing, isn't it? Because there's festivals for everything except sort of nature. Mostly because kind of you imagine that some human type performance has to go into a festival, and then you think spring sort of happens on its own.
Yeah, and this spring, as you can see from the photographs, it was amazing. The weather was fantastic.
I mean, this is, as somebody who has spent so many holidays in Scotland, when I grew up in Belfast, even every summer we spent in Caithness for 16 years, I have never seen weather like this in Scotland. And it kind of alters your behaviour. You know, you stop planning, worrying about, having endless waterproofs. You just go out somewhere and, you just don't come back cycling for 8 hours because... what was the problem, Got enough water, passed the hotel, had a brilliant meal.
Yeah,
we just had a ball.
It was fantastic. And for an island where it was just, it was really deceptive in lots of ways. Beautiful and deceptive, as you can kind of guess. There were a lot of hills.
Yes. Because when people sort of see big old hills like Skye and the Colonsay or something, you kind of think, right, that's hills. But then you don't cycle over those hills.
No, that's right.
Weir hills are the kind of killers. I mean, there were so many times on the bike I was down in the granny gear and standing up on the bike and everything and finally got off.
Yeah, but
you think I'm a patsy anyway, don't you?
Before we actually turn this into some sort of Tour de France, it was really great in that the island's small enough that you can zip around, you can go to beaches. As you'll see, there's lots and lots of blonde beaches. Or what did we call them in Gaelic now, Lesley?
This would be the Tri-Ban. Because we went to, this is what the Spring Festival was very cleverly did, because it picked things like the names of mountains and the names of all the natural features. And it had a great guy whose name has just escaped me completely, who is from, his grandmother is from Colonsay. And he did a tremendous thing of just all the words that you've ever wondered about in Gaelic that you see all the time in place names. Drum means a ridge, and there was different levels of hill.
And beg means small,
which that's good to establish because that's your mother's
maiden name.
So there was all sorts of interest in that. And Tri-Ban, all the beaches around Colonsay were called the Fair Beach.
That's
because
right.
They're all beautifully white like that.
Yeah, and indeed, I mean, with some of them we had to cycle over them, and to get to places like Oronsay, which was just fantastic to cycle across the Strand to this wee island. It's wee island. It's
a wee island off a wee island.
Wee island off a wee island, and then to cycle on to get to this beautiful priory, which was all pristine.
Yeah, this is an Augustinian priory, isn't it? And it was apparently set up by Columba when he was coming from Ireland, and he set something up there, and then climbed Ben Orosay. Still was able to see Ireland over the horizon, and figured that was no use because for whatever reason he wanted to get shot Ireland. So that's why he picked himself up and took himself on to Iona, where he couldn't see Ireland anymore. But what a fantastically tranquil place it is. I mean, so tranquil actually that I thought I'd lost the lens cap for my camera. We ended up on our hands and knees going through this ancient priory, also with its Celtic cross, with one little grave that I'm not quite sure what it was, with beautiful little flowers and whatever. Anyway, forensically looking for this blasted thing, which when we gave up finally was right beside my bike.
That's right.
But by that time, we were right on the tidal race to get back.
Yeah, so we had to race back like Billy Whiz to get across the Strand.
Which was kind of all right. But, obviously they time this. They say to you, if the low tide's at 11, you can start walking at 9 and you must be back on the mainland by 1.
That's right. Otherwise,
we started cycling
it. Thunderbird 2 out to find you. That's...
Yeah, we started cycling at about kind of 25 to 1 and it was fine.
Yeah,
but But it does give you that little sort of sense of, slight urgency and stuff, which, otherwise you can just keep cycling to your heart's content. And the great thing, I was reading a book, there's a marvellous book about islands. It's probably the definitive Scottish island book by Hamish Haswell Smith, I think. And Jean Urquhart gave it to us for our wedding. And it observes of Colonsay that it is an island where you are free to roam at will. And I would say that is my enduring memory of it, because it's only when you're able to cycle like that, where landscape just keeps turning into the next thing without barriers, without there's obviously fences and gates where there's livestock.
The fences actually worked. And the gates work,
and there's still a path. It's not. Right. There's no, keep out signs. Yeah. There's none of that sort of bristling feeling that this is somebody else's land.
But also, you were able to get very close to things, because the sheep and the cows,
little lambs, the calves,
the lamb gangs, and everything else were there. But it was actually interesting because you could go through the landscape, and it was kind of like, it was very gentle, and there was no. You kind of rambled around.
Do you know one thing I really enjoyed? we got up at 4 a.m. on the morning of May the 1st, Beltane, to see the sunrise over Jura. And this was another great wheeze where a lot of the low hills are actually duns, which are kind of fortified mountain tops from, the days around the Vikings, I guess. And they had a signal system, which is actually functions all the way up the Western Isles, such that people could light fires, say the Vikings are coming, and skedaddle. Those promontories are clearly still there, and the signals could be used. And for this night, they were used. And we got up at 4 a.m. in the darkness, cycled towards this tallest hill in the dark, and got there to see 5 or 6 summits around Colonsay, all with this beacon light on top of them. And it was a fabulous thing, to see people as barking as you are. You never know in this life whether it's just you that has the kind of idea for this sort of thing. All of them up there doing their beacon thing. And on the way to it, my enduring memory actually is going through field after field with the sound of sort of what do you call them? Cicadas, crickets.
Yeah, crickets.
The sort of chirping sound that you would hear in the Mediterranean was a constant, burr in the morning there. And with the weather as it was, although it was absolutely freezing in the wind in the morning, it just made you think you'd actually stepped right out of Scotland and somehow had walked into the Mediterranean. I think amplified by the fact that Colonsay sits at the back of Scotland. It's on the west coast of Jura, which is uninhabited, and it faces the west coast of Iona, which is also uninhabited. So, it's kind of sitting, I'm sure that's why politicians like it, because, it's safe. It's sitting out there. And in fact, people have said to me, where is Colonsay? And it's sort of, it is just at the back of Jura, which helps nobody, because nobody knows where Jura is either. Jura's off Campbelltown. Where's Campbelltown? Campbelltown's off, Glasgow eventually. That's
right. But I tell you, one of the interesting places on the island that I found was the Colonsay house itself, which had a fantastic garden and the just amazing for a place that you'd imagine would be either wet and windy or whatever. It was just fantastic. I mean, the walled gardens, lots of different plant life. It was.
But it's even, as with all these things, it's even kind of like bigger than that, because the family that took over the estate from the McNeils in the early 1900s planted up the whole area with every deciduous tree there is. So they first of all created a windbreak, but then they've sort of created a microclimate. And underneath these trees are just the most lovely blankets and meadows of bluebells and white wild garlic flowers. Just beautiful little pink, delicate flowers in the middle of it all. I mean, there was a stage where you were getting fed up with me because I was stopping every 5 feet practically to photograph this. But it's that kind of I guess it was planned, but it's almost like natural exuberance. This beautiful species gets a habitat that suits it so well, it just can't be stopped, you know. It's like it just races across that I just loved it. And we had a wee path that we took, a wee back, well, we call our secret path, but then we were the only ones that we ever saw on it, which went past a loch and took you up to this incredibly steep little way to get back round to the hotel at Scalaleg, the main village whose name has just suddenly gone because you never call it the village, you say we're going round to the hotel. It's the only place, well, there is actually the pantry, isn't it? That's a little restaurant that we never went to. But the hotel we stayed in for 2 nights, and it's just a fantastic hotel. My big thing is painted wood. I love old-fashioned, traditional wood panelling, but why does everybody varnish it? Because in the old days, people used to paint it, and the subtle colours of the paint, they're just lovely and so relaxed, as well as being a kind of quite it was an elegant place with really good food. But the day that we got our feet soaking by taking a shortcut, on my advice that was a bad one, we actually walked in to have dinner in our bare feet with the shoes outside, and nobody batted an eyelid. They're the friendliest staff out.
Yeah, it was really cool and calm and collected in that kind of way. But at the same time...
But it also didn't have this big divide you often get between the guests and the locals. I mean, the bar is so sort of integrated into where the restaurant is that you can easily sort of drift between different types of people, you know, which was pretty good. So, sorry, I interrupted you. I'm always doing that.
No, it's fine, because I just found it was a really, really relaxed, kind of chilled kind of place where there was plenty going on in terms of every time you went outside there was something new to follow up. You know, there was sounds of birds. Terrific place, really terrific, and we're going to call it probably our best kept secret, because it was just. We're used to islands where it's much more adventurous cycling than this. You know, in terms of Orkney, whether you're hammering along or you know you're going nearly anywhere. This was really nice, small, just right for cyclists. Forget your bike.
Yeah,
leave your bike at home.
No,
leave your car at home. Leave the car at home. Take the bike.
And don't take the car, because a lot of people we saw had taken a car with the bikes on the back. And you see, the first time that you actually have to do something that seems strange to you, like get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you'll take the car and then you'll never take the bike. The nicest times we had were after we'd had dinner round at the hotel, cycling home in the dark without lights, really, and just being, you know, there's always ambient light at this time of year. And you realise that there is no darkness. You could even come flying down hills into a sheep grid almost in the dark and feel perfectly all right with it. I did anyway. Yeah, I loved that.
For those mums and dads who've got kids and whatever, you might not want to do this, but it's a fantastic place and well worth the price of admission, we thought.
Our favourite place in the end, where was it? I mean, that beach, actually, Balnahard Beach at the very top of the island. This was a bit of a long slog to get there, actually. This was a right uppy-doony thing up and over a couple of hills. And by that stage, having cycled for 2 days, we were getting a wee bit tired. We met some folk who'd walked, and I think they had almost got to the end. And it's a wee bit of a trackly bit at the end there. There's a lot of cows and sheep, and it's not quite as sort of idyllic and vegetationally interesting, if you like, because of the wee scourers there, as it is further south. So they'd sort of given up and come back. We ploughed on. What a beach! I mean, that is just, you see, if the pictures are there now, it's really impossible to do justice to it, but the intensity of the kind of blues, you know, in Gaelic there are meant to be 5 words for the colour blue, and every one of those 5, I don't know what they are. I know Gorham is a kind of turquoise, but you know, every kind of blue is in that sea. It was lovely. And then there was the other beach on the other side where you were singing to the seals.
Yep, that's right. The seals that stuck their noses in the air because they didn't like the singing. So
but we always do the same thing. We sing "O Brother, Wherefore Art Thou?" And then I always do this 23rd Psalm because I think they're probably Presbyterian seals. And it's just, you know, it's just very good fun. They stand there looking at you, you know. Oh, it's just great.
Yeah, but on the whole, good crack. really enjoyed it, and we hope you've enjoyed all the photographs.
Mm-hmm.